Hello, and welcome to Shadow Me Next, a podcast where I take you into and behind the scenes of the medical world to provide you with a deeper understanding of the human side of medicine. I'm Ashley, a physician assistant, medical editor, clinical preceptor, and the creator of Shadow Me Next. It is my pleasure to introduce you to incredible members of the healthcare field and uncover their unique stories, the joys and challenges they face, and what drives them in their careers. It's access you want and stories you need. Whether you're a pre-health student or simply curious about the healthcare field, I invite you to join me as we take a conversational and personal look into the lives and minds of leaders in medicine. I don't want you to miss a single one of these conversations, so make sure that you subscribe to this podcast, which will automatically notify you when new episodes are dropped, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Shadow Me Next, where we will review highlights from this conversation and where I'll give you sneak previews of our upcoming guests. What happens when you combine the curiosity of Sherlock Holmes, the heart of a mentor, and a whiteboard on wheels? You get Dr. Ali Zreik, a physician educator who's redefining how we teach, practice, and experience medicine. Today on Shadow Me Next, I am so excited to introduce you to Dr. Zreik, an internal medicine attending physician and associate program director at a prestigious hospital. But this conversation is about more than titles. It's about purpose. From his early inspiration drawn from Dr. Lisa Sanders in the TV show House, to his own "bring me the whiteboard" moments during rounds, Dr. Zreik brings a refreshing blend of intellect, compassion, and vision to medical education. We explore how he's building more than clinical competency. He's creating happiness at the point of care. And yes, we dive into how something as simple as a dry erase marker can completely change the dynamic between a frustrated patient and a burned out medical team. In this episode, you'll learn why the most difficult patients can become your greatest teachers, how bridging the gap between science and humanity transforms learners and lives, why curiosity and asking questions aren't just encouraged, they're essential to discovering your why in medicine, and how Dr. Zreik is building new tools and texts to reshape the future of healthcare. Whether you're a pre-health student, a resident, or someone who's felt the tension between bureaucracy and bedside care, this conversation is for you. Please keep in mind that the content of this podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as professional medical advice. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. This is Shadow Me Next with Dr. Ali Zreik. Hi, Dr. Z. Thank you so much for joining me today on Shadow Me Next. I am just so thrilled that you have made time for us. Thank you.
It's absolutely my privilege, Ashley. I'm always here to help, and I do appreciate how you've offered a light to the compassion of medicine and guiding people in ways that are actually very helpful. So whatever I can do, I'd love to share with that today with you.
I appreciate that. And that's actually, we met on LinkedIn, and that's actually what drew me so much to your profile was how you are in education, and yet you're not just teaching the science and you're not just teaching the diagnoses and the treatment, but you're really revitalizing this whole approach to medicine. And you're encouraging people to see the whole person and to, perhaps consider, I don't know, the patient maybe, as opposed to the diagnosis first. So thank you. I think that we will learn so much about how to approach a patient and not just how to work in medicine from our conversation. So Dr. Z, tell us a little bit about your beginnings.
Ashley, thank you for that introduction, by the way. I hope I deserve it. To begin with, I've always been very Sherlockian in my approach to everything in life. And medicine was the best vessel to that. Internal medicine in itself has been somewhat of a Sherlockian methodology for me. And to be able to deliver information in an algorithmic fashion, intertwined with some, poetry, passion, purpose, medicine's kind of come to light for me that way. I joke around a lot with my colleagues sometimes, and I say I'm secretly a narcissist because I love seeing people learning, and it gives me true gratification. So seeing the future of doctors grow, being able to deliver information in this Sherlockian algorithmic sense, it's really become a big milestone in my life. Um, a little bit about what inspired me, I would say, is a physician named Lisa Sanders. She's an American author, physician, and a journalist. She was the forefront of internal medicine and professor at Yale. She began writing in 2002 at the New York Times column called Diagnosis, where she basically covered medical mystery cases and later founding the concept behind our very own television series, House.
Mm.
So she kind of brought a sense of medicine, what I want to practice medicine like. And she really says something very amazing in one of her books. It's called Every Patient Tells a Story. And I actually wrote it down here just so we can all have a good reference. She says the basic sciences of anatomy, physiology, biology, and chemistry are linked to a patient at the bedside through very specific stories that doctors learn and eventually create. It's the story that every doctor puts together for herself with the knowledge she gains from books and patients. The more experience a doctor has with any of these illnesses, the richer and more detailed the illness script she has of the disease becomes. So it's reveling in the Sherlockian process itself and being a detective and taking that plus compassion towards patients and bringing the best experience to light at the bedside. And that's really kind of driven my whole expertise, I think, in medicine.
That's incredible. I love that. Thank you, Dr. Sanders, for creating such a beautiful resource for people. I love hearing where people got their inspiration from. And, of course, a lot of people will say a family member encouraged them, or perhaps a family friend, something like that. For you, it was reading stories on a page by Dr. Sanders. It's just, finding inspiration in every little corner of our lives. It can be really motivating. Every patient does tell a story, and this is where experience comes in, right? I think so often people find that a physician or a PA or an NP that has a lot of experience, it means they know a bunch of things, right? Well, perhaps, but it also means they've seen and experienced and lived and loved a bunch of patients through a bunch of things.
Absolutely. Well said, Ashley. And, um, it is unfortunate, and we have to sometimes, as even though we're so passionate in this regard, we do have to see the unfortunate reality unfolding sometimes in healthcare institutions. Medicine has really changed. It was once this paradox of fascination, science, an experience of awe. And somewhere along the road, length of stay, hospital bureaucracy, advances in healthcare technology, that perspective changed. We went from being, patient oriented to goal and task oriented. So despite all our trillions of dollars from 1990 to 2020 and our advances in the state of the art diagnostic tools, studies still show a significant number of patients, they're unhappy about their medical providers and they feel unhappy because that lack of compassion. So the paradigm shift I feel that we need to illustrate to our listeners and to our future healthcare professionals is that we have to bridge the social and the science. And that's the most important thing I think we can offer as healthcare professionals.
And that's why I love so much the phrase that you used, Sherlockian, because I think a lot of people really resonate with that, right? They resonate with the obsession with the problem and the desire to solve the mystery. And those problems are the ones that our patients are experiencing. Our patients are the ones with the mystery. So you really have to partner with them in order
Exactly.
to get the whole picture, right?
Exactly.
Dr. Z, tell me, you mentioned, of course, you mentioned the fantastic medical show House, and there's been many more even since then. And I think, of course, we are, God, as clinicians especially, but even as pre-health students, I think we're so drawn to these stories and these shows because, well, number one, they're just incredible. Number two, we do end up learning a bunch of things. Obviously, it's a drama, right?
Right.
But there's good. So, let's say, what would you tell a pre-health student who's come to you and said, "Hey, Dr. Zeke, I watched this really awesome show. It's this medical show. Is this real life? Tell me, is this what you do on a daily basis? How does your story resonate with that?"
Sure. And, Ashley, I've been asked this question before because of the numerous references I have to Lisa Sanders. And I will say my answer has been consistently about the same. I usually tell them to really focus on the moments of inspiration in these kind of shows. It's obviously I don't want them to learn all the personality issues that come with certain personas, but I do want them to focus that there are going to be moments in medicine where you're going to have that connection, where you're going to feel that form of inspiration. I mean, even now, I have some pivotal moments with patients, and I'd love to share with you one or two of those where
Yes.
I have a problematic patient with it, which in a show would come off as, a climactic moment. And then at the end of it, I find some sort of peace and art with my patient. And so I would focus on the merit behind delivering care, but also creating and tailoring your own persona and your own medical knowledge to really deliver that care. So to some extent, it's good to have some inspiration from whatever source you can find, but it's really bringing that to life in your own profession, I think.
That is so perfect. Thank you
Yeah,
so much. I'm totally gonna steal that because I too have received this question very often. And of course,
sure.
our cut and dry responses, well, all medicine is not Grey's Anatomy, and
Right,
that's
right.
true.
Yeah,
But focusing on the moments of inspiration and the merit behind delivering care, that's perfect. That's
exactly.
exactly the whole point. Dr. Z, tell us about what does a day in your life look like right now?
Sure. So I'm an associate program director at a residency program, internal medicine. I work at a level one trauma. I have about 15 residents per class. I tell people all the time I have about 7 or 8 tentacles. And what I mean by that is I really take on a lot of roles, and that's because I love doing it. A day to day for me would be, waking up in the morning, coming to round. I will say I'm very notorious for having a rolling whiteboard at rounds. So what I do with this thing is at every single patient room after we've discussed the case, me and the residents and the students, I go through all the physiology, the guidelines, the diagnosis, and the treatments on this whiteboard. And I really try to tie together the medical school physiology all the way to the stuff being discussed really at like guidelines and conference based level. So that's like a typical rounding for me. I also hold these noon conferences in this residency program where I work on high yield internal medicine topics and delivering that at like kind of a patient case scenario, and other times lectures where I go over the pathologies and physiologies. Um, I'm part of the academic curriculum on quality and research too. So, it's a very long list of things that I do, but to be quite honest with you, the most important thing for me is seeing that the residents are happy, the students are learning, and our quality of care is delivered in the most optimal fashion. So I always and I tell my residents and my students that at the end of the day, no matter what we do, whatever guideline we follow, whatever milestone we reach with our requirements, we always have to make, you know, happiness at the point of care. And that's ultimately what motivates me, inspires me to come and do all of this every single day.
That's incredible. Now I have a picture of you with 7 or 8 tentacles, and it's just fantastic. Happiness at the point of care. You are the associate program director, you are the attending in this case. How do you make sure that your residents are truly understanding this concept? I mean, I can only imagine how many different things a resident is worrying about on the day to day. I mean, they're trying to learn, they're trying to hone their skills. And then you tell them, happiness at the point of care for everybody involved, this is our goal. And they must look at you and go, wait, what? I thought our goal is something different. How do you convey that and make sure that the well-being of not just your patient, but also your resident is really being looked after?
Absolutely. And there's a real art to this more than it is a science. And I will say with much humility that that's the one great thing I've learned as an attending is how to bridge that gap. It's difficult that, without a doubt, bridging the academics of residency to patient care, personability, the wellness of the healthcare professionals, it really takes a lot of experience, I think, and learning about yourself and your own shortcomings too. My way of handling this is to remind myself the very reason I'm here on this earth between these residents, that I'm here as a mentor. I'm here to bridge the gap between what's real and what's in their books and to really make the point of care come to light for them. So the point behind using this whiteboard, for example, is really to show them how we can take so much information and really tie it together like a puzzle. And when you see that, and when they experience that, even burnout, we're able to make their experience a whole lot better. So it's really within just taking a nice marker and drawing a picture for them, you really bring that to light, and it becomes more moral and intellectual and happy to work humanely with gentleness, concern, and being able to deliver information in a way that is interesting rather than disciplinary. That's the most important way to keep their experience light and going.
Yes, yes. And thank you so much for providing this incredible mentorship to these residents and literally everybody else who is watching you teach them. I mean, it could be, any of the other medical staff on the floor that you're working, or perhaps just a patient's family member that's sitting in the room or listening outside the door. The mentorship you're providing has been such a key element for so many clinicians that I have talked to. I would imagine that you have had fantastic mentorship that has shaped you and shaped your career. Is that your story?
You know what? I've had so many ups and downs, Ashley. When I was in residency, I had a program director who was, when you first meet him at a glance, you think he's really tough. But I've really learned that compassion comes in so many different forms. And really it's the point of care where you really get to see people's personas and you learn from. So what may appear as a tough attending in certain lights may actually be the most compassionate person at the bedside. And it's all this culmination of experiences I've gained from great doctors, hard doctors, easier doctors, people with so many different personas in medicine, plus all the passion and the education I've learned and chased myself. I've kind of tailored it into my own type of mentality. Um, it's really interesting to me because the time I've learned the most and the time I've been able to exhibit this at the highest level has really been with my most difficult and what most people would call problematic patients.
Mhm.
I'd love to share an experience, for example, with you where I had a patient in the ICU a couple of weeks ago with heart failure and aortic stenosis. Um, I remember my team of residents coming to me and telling me, Dr. Zreik, we have a very problematic patient. The staff is really frustrated. He doesn't want any of the medicines we're giving him. And I welcome the chaos. That type of darkness is where light really comes in, right?
Mhm.
So my colleagues were signing out to me this difficult patient who needed a TAVR, who needed all these medical therapies for heart failure. I remember looking at the residents, nurses, and the team members. You see, now we're kind of inspiring the institution, everyone within the ICU. And I told them, bring me the rolling whiteboard.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
everyone laughed initially, right? Um, but what initially appeared to be an exhausted patient who was extremely frustrated, first thing I remember doing is walking in the room. I fist pumped the patient. And I remember saying, brother, I'm here to help. I know there's a lot going on. And I don't want to do anything except provide myself to you today. So one line to the next, one heartfelt reply to the next, drawing a heart, explaining the physiology. What appears to be a patient for years who required all these therapies, who's been led by cardiologists and multiple specialists, he broke down in tears.
Mhm.
And the same patient ended up deciding to all of us, and it was a learning experience to everyone in the room, the nurses, me, the residents. You can see a patient who was finally inspired.
Mhm.
And it's in moments like this where we can cultivate an environment between ourselves, nurses, patients, where we can provide the highest quality of care. All it requires is going back to the drawing board and inspiring people.
Quite literally, the drawing board, right? I love that. Bring me the rolling whiteboard. And it benefited your team, your medical team that was in there, but it benefited that patient. I mean, when has that patient ever had somebody illustrate a heart in front of him?
Yeah,
Probably never.
yeah, and that's what he said. He said never. And this is not my opportunity to showcase myself. And I'm so sorry if I sound egotistical. I just want to, illustrate one concept is that sometimes by caring a little bit more, it can go a long way.
Mhm. Mhm. No, absolutely. But no, it's just lessons learned, right? Because I'm sure that you, much like me, have walked into these difficult, quote unquote, problematic patients, the patients that you really just want to go, oh,
Right.
and we've had experiences where perhaps we have been frustrated. It kind of reminds me of parenting, like with my girls, there are moments when, I behave in a way that I'm not proud of with my
Right.
children. And I
Mhm.
take that lesson and I take that moment. This is the same with patients too. And then you grow from it and you move on. And you've probably had that opportunity. And now you can approach a patient like this. And instead of going, oh, you can give him a fist bump and say, listen, I've got you. You've got me now. And
Right.
we're going to figure this out together. And I think that patients just want to feel like we are on their team. They want to
Absolutely.
be standing next to you at the whiteboard trying to figure this out with everybody else. And no, I think that's really great. Dr. Z, what are
Sure.
you doing differently in medical education today that you wish had existed when you yourself were a resident? How about that?
Right. So for me, when I was in residency, actually, I really cared more about, to be honest, the science. I wanted to deliver as much information, a plethora of information,
Mhm.
to showcase the amount of information and knowledge that we can actually provide to our patients. And I really took pride in being able to explain everything to a T to my patients. Growing into becoming an attending, I've learned that it's more than that. It's kind of like, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Atul Gawande. He's this American author and surgeon who wrote this book called Being Mortal. But he says, you go into this work thinking it's all a matter of a canny diagnosis, some technical prowess, and some ability to empathize with people, but it's not. Soon you find out we have to grapple with systems, resources, circumstances, and our own shortcomings. And he puts it really well. And I feel that in the last couple of years, especially, I've kind of learned that it's more than just having that technical prowess to be able to deliver that care, but really, really focusing on connecting people to the information and also to the quality of care beyond the scope of the science. I mean, patients are some communities of patients, they're genetically born into disparity. And
Mhm.
there are things we can control, things that we can't. But what we're here for, and I'm going to continue to emphasize, is everything that we can offer has to come from a multifactorial perspective. Knowledge is great, compassion is great. Tying it all together and trying to understand where these people are coming from, I think that's something I feel that I've really acclimated a little bit better to in the last couple of years.
Amazing experience, right? I mean, it
Exactly.
comes from so much experience. Dr. Z, tell me about how you care for your residents because I can tell that you care for their medical education, you care for their perception on where they stand in these patients' lives. Is that it? I mean, outside of this, they're in residency with you for a little while. What
Right.
does that relationship look like?
You know, as a mentor and more importantly as a friend, I like to take a step back from expectations sometimes to figure out what's exactly happening to the residents or the students. Sometimes it's not really the best day of the week or the best day of their life.
Hmm.
And it could be a matter of personal issues, or it can be just maybe the delivery information. So sometimes a resident could be overwhelmed, and everybody works at different paces. And it's best to access that data bank of information before assuming guidance is always the answer. So I try my best to tailor everyone's academic plans, their learning, and really how they approach patient care and their journey in medical education to each resident on their own. I have the privilege of working with these residents and students, and they come from all across the world here at Hurley. I mean, I've worked with students and residents from all across the world. And with much humility, I also need to learn my own shortcomings and
Hmm.
that it's not always as perfect as a machine or some sort of educational curriculum. You have to really understand people just like we're trying to understand patients. So, really instilling some sort of pride and inspiration in them is the best way about going and doing this, and really teaching them by example. but nothing's perfect. And this is a process that requires learning every day.
Imagine so with every new group of residents, because you get a
Absolutely.
new group every year, right? So with every new group of
Exactly.
residents, it's new personalities, new people,
Exactly.
which is just amazing. Speaking of which, do they often remain in contact with you after this? I mean, once they've moved on, do they still reach out?
Absolutely. That's my metric of success for myself is when I know a resident has graduated and they reach out to me. A lot of times they do reach out to kind of just say hello. I've really developed a strong friendship with so many of them. And sometimes they reach out to me to kind of elaborate on their own experiences and tell me about their patients. And it's really a proud moment for me to hear that the education I was able to provide to them has really made an impact on them later in their own personal careers.
I think that's a perfect metric. I think that's the best metric, right? Are they
Absolutely.
reaching out? Do they want to update you on your life, on their lives? Do they want to tell you, about a patient, or just, commiserate about perhaps a memory of
Absolutely.
them in residency? Before we transition, I want to start talking to some of our pre-health students here in just a minute. But before we
Yeah, sure.
transition to that, you briefly mentioned a word that is just such a it's a hot topic right now. It has been for a while, but it's burnout. It's burnout in medicine. Everybody experiences this at some point. But I'm just so curious to know how you protect your passion from this awful thing called burnout. You've mentioned poetry and you've mentioned art. And I would just love to hear a little bit of advice from you on how to stay so passionate.
Absolutely. There's a lot of evidence base and literature that's actually being provided and so many different TED Talks on this. I've learned, especially from my personal experience and the literature, that when I enjoy what I do, I gain a sense of responsibility and purpose. And with that purpose, making my happiness at the point of care, I'm actually less likely to burn out. Even data suggests that if we optimize our language and our quality of care, burnout burden becomes actually less. That's not to say that you shouldn't be detaching, but doing that plus really creating a sense of purpose, I feel really helps mitigate the risk of burnout. I can't really speak on this all the time because I'm a workaholic sometimes. I just got off a 5 week straight rounding. But that's me. But I do qualify it by saying to everyone that it's good to have balance. But when we try to really experience the happiness of what we do, I do think we mitigate the burnout.
That's great. Just being intentional about making happiness at the point of care. It's not just something that happens. I mean, sometimes it is. Those are really great moments,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
thank you so much.
Mhm.
Dr. Z, we have a
Sure.
segment on the show. It is called Quality Questions.
Yeah.
And this is where you and I discuss an interview type question that you have either heard or you like to ask, that is just memorable for whatever reason. This helps pre-health students develop a cache of interview questions for them to practice. And it also usually spurs really great conversation. Do you have one of these quality questions for us? Keep in mind that there's more interview prep, such as mock interviews and personal statement review, over on shadowmenext.com. There, you'll find amazing resources to help you as you prepare to answer your own quality questions.
Absolutely. I have a lot of them actually, but what I would like to kind of showcase and ask would be when you're interviewing to work at institutions, whether you're applying to residency or going to a medical school that serves a certain community, because doing your rotations, you still have a sense of autonomy and responsibility towards that community. What I tend to ask my students and a lot of the applicants applying is what inspires you about the community that you're going to serve? Because a lot of the education that we typically learn about in medicine really revolves around curriculums and milestones and exams and things like that. But what we really care so much about, especially people who are very compassionate about the communities that they serve, is ultimately what what brings you to our community and why do you want to serve our patient population? Sometimes you can be the most intelligent individual, have so much science behind your name, but what really matters is how you can deliver that information and how much you care about the people that you're serving. I work here in Flint, and Flint, to kind of showcase what it's like. I mean, we've been published by the NIH regarding the opioid crisis. Our patients are living with advanced heart failure and they don't even know what heart failure means. So when I interview people, what I care more about is how hard do you want to work for a community that's underserved? And that's ultimately what I want to relay to people.
That is one of the best quality questions I have ever heard. What a fantastic, fantastic thing. And I'm sure you've gotten some pretty impressive responses from that when you've asked that in interviews.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've gotten responses where some students may even reference the water crisis in the past. But
Mhm.
I don't always want to know all the details of what they're doing, but I want to know that they're putting forth a real effort and due diligence to really care about a community that's not as privileged as we are.
And it's a great reminder to anyone interviewing for a job anywhere,
Mhm.
unless it's a remote position. And even then, there's a certain culture, but, really investigate not just the role, but the community that you're stepping into, and you're
Absolutely.
going to be there for a little bit. You might as well make big changes and big differences in the people's lives who are also there. So that's fantastic.
Well said, Ashley. It's exactly right.
For pre med or pre health students, either one,
Yeah.
that are perhaps unsure about where they belong in medicine. In your opinion, what should they be paying attention to, like during shadowing experiences or any time they have exposure to medicine? What would you encourage them to look for? And these are students that perhaps might not have
Mhm.
an exact idea of where they want to end up in this career.
Absolutely. I hope this can be beneficial. My advice to every future doctor professional, because that's what they are, is to create a sense of why for yourself. Why do you care for medicine? Why do you want to be in healthcare? And then to use that to drive your presence. So when you're on a rotation, then you can move on to ask the how. It'll make it flow well. So you'll need to ask questions, understand that you're not supposed to really know all the information yet, but it's in the art of asking that really identity gets created in medicine. So show up, ask questions, go home, read. The best students I worked with are the ones who had been really curious when they rounded with me and they really expressed a genuine interest to learn. And by the way, us attendings and directors and even residents, they can feel that, by the way.
Mhm,
Intuition
mhm.
exists in all of us, and that extends into the very system that we have here in medical education. So, really caring and asking a lot of questions, that's the most beautiful thing you can do as a student.
That's perfect. And that really more practice in that builds on what you said previously. It builds
Mhm.
on the merit behind delivering care, right? If you're practicing that before you even begin to deliver care,
Right.
once you're actually caring for these patients and chatting with them and doing all of these things, it makes that so much easier.
Exactly.
Well, Dr.
Exactly.
Zreik, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we go, I read one of your interviews that you are
Yeah.
working on some texts and guides to revitalize the approach to medicine. And you're doing this with up to date studies and in clinical practice. Tell me a little bit more about this. How do you hope to change the face of healthcare during your career?
Absolutely. I've been working on these texts since I was a second year resident in residency. I've been trying to
Oh,
compile all this information, tying there's so many resources out there. You have Up to Date, you have Amboss, you have Mixapp, you have UWorlds, you have all this information. And sometimes it's so fragmented. What you may learn in medical school may not perfectly translate into residency, and what you've learned in residency may not actually translate perfectly at specialty levels. So I've been working on these texts to revitalize medicine and kind of bridge that gap and teach all that information, and hopefully in a video series one day. It's a work in progress, but I don't like to just emphasize that because, again, I want people to be inspired by the quality of care, not just the information behind it. So hopefully, I can take all these ambitions that I have and really turn it into something a little bit more formidable one day.
then the product is going to just be beautiful. I know it. We cannot wait to see what you do. Thank you so much for the care that you've provided, for the education that you give, and for joining us and sharing it all with us today on Shadow Me Next. I am so grateful.
Thank you so much, Ashley, and thank you for everything that you do. We're all very lucky to have someone like you who's showcasing all this and really bringing medicine to a whole different light. We appreciate you. Thank you.
You make it easy. Thanks. Thank you so very much for listening to this episode of Shadow Me Next. If you liked this episode, or if you think it could be useful for a friend, please subscribe and invite them to join us next Monday. As always, if you have any questions, let me know on Facebook or Instagram. Access you want, stories you need. You're always invited to Shadow Me Next.